Who said that love needs grand gestures to happen? Sometimes, it all starts with a hot cup, a sentence scribbled on a paper cup, and a silence that makes noise inside us. Every morning, he ordered coffee to go. Until the day he decided to stay. Tom was in a hurry, Hillary was calm, and between one sip and the next, the routine became a meeting. While the rain fell outside, inside something was born that no one saw, but everyone felt: connection, care, a type of affection that makes no noise, but fills every empty corner. The steam from the coffee rose, carrying with it secrets, fears, desires that no one had the courage to confess out loud. Those who observe from afar think he is just another customer, another waitress. But those who experience it up close understand that this counter holds passages that change days, glances that warm you more than coffee, stories that don't fit into a simple takeout container. And maybe that's why, that morning, Tom didn't walk through the door like he always did. Because there are times when the heart asks you to stay, even when your head tells you to run. And that's where it all begins. Stories like these remind us that a simple coffee can be more than just a drink. It can be the beginning of a love that slowly changes everything. Every detail counts: the strong smell, the handwritten note, the soft sound of the spoon in the cup. This type of encounter is where many people forget: feeling, listening, staying. Here, each story holds a truth hidden in small gestures that make all the difference. That's why this channel exists, to share moments that warm your heart and remind you that love still fits into busy days. Did you enjoy feeling this now? Then leave a like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any details of the next stories that come hot, one by one, to remind you that love is still worth it. Tom always walked down the same street, with the same hurried step, his suit slightly wrinkled, his tie askew as if it didn't even deserve to be fixed. His leather briefcase banged against his leg, his cell phone vibrated in his pocket, but none of that could hold back what was loose inside him. From the outside, anyone could see just another man in a hurry, but if anyone looked closely, if anyone had the courage to look, they could see a tiredness hidden behind his gaze that never stopped anywhere. He pretended he was too busy to notice any detail, but every day he stopped at the same glass door, read the words scribbled on a chalkboard hanging at the entrance, and ordered strong coffee, 2 packets of sugar, and a cup to go. Tom was the kind of man who didn't know how to wait, but every morning he waited for Hillary to make coffee. Maybe because it was the only minute of the day when silence didn't weigh him down. Hillary arrived before the street woke up. The coffee shop smelled of freshly baked cake and plants that she spread out on makeshift shelves, as if she wanted to transform cement into a garden. Her hands were small, almost fragile, but they held warm mugs like someone holding secrets. She had a short smile, like someone who doesn't waste words, but keeps phrases inside her heart to use when they make sense. Hillary knew the name of each customer, but she was especially careful with that man with the crooked tie who wouldn't look anyone in the eye. In the first few months, she only stamped the cup with phrases copied from old books, notes stolen from forgotten napkins. Then, she started writing in her own way, short, direct phrases that seemed like a message for whoever needed to hear it. And Tom, even without saying it, kept all of them folded in the bottom of his leather briefcase. The coffee shop was small, squeezed between a drugstore and a newsstand, but it seemed bigger when the rain beat against the glass and the steam from the coffee fogged up the display window. Inside, the yellow lights made time pass more slowly. There were 2 round tables, 3 crooked chairs, and a bench against the wall where Hillary left abandoned books for anyone who wanted to browse. Above the counter, a small wooden sign said, "Sit down. No one is in a hurry here." Even so, Tom never sat down. He ordered his coffee, thanked them quietly, and turned around before anyone started talking. He couldn't stand conversations that lasted longer than his cell phone would allow. But without realizing it, he always waited 2 extra seconds when Hillary turned to get her sugar packet. 2 seconds in which she returned with the cup and her eyes met his, and he quickly looked away, as if hiding a silly secret. At the back of the coffee shop, Hillary kept a pot with a plant that no one understood how it was still alive. It was a hibiscus that insisted on blooming in the cold. Everyone said it couldn't. She replied that it could, and that the secret was to speak softly, water it properly, and give it time to learn how to stay alive. That was how she saw people too. No one came in without a word, a hot cup of coffee, and a chance to stay, even if it was just for 5 more minutes. Tom noticed all this behind the glass, but he didn't tell anyone. Not even himself. Sometimes he would just stand outside, fiddling with his phone, pretending to read messages that weren't coming. Hillary noticed, but she pretended not to see, too. She had learned that some people only stay when they think they're not being seen. One of those gray mornings, Tom came in wet with a fine drizzle, his hair dripping, his shoes dirty with puddles. Hillary held out a napkin before he even asked. He held the paper carefully, read the sentence that said, "Today you don't have to run." And for a second, he almost believed it. He ordered coffee, took the cup, but instead of turning to the door, he looked at the bench against the wall. The place was empty, a forgotten mug on the table, steam still rising. Hillary wiped the counter slowly, waiting for him to leave as usual. But Tom didn't. He stood there, with the leather briefcase resting on his leg, the cup still closed, the sugar untouched. It was then that the sound of the rain outside became louder than the noise inside. Hillary looked up, met his eyes, and smiled, as if offering shelter. And Tom, for the first time, pulled up his chair, put his briefcase on the floor, and breathed like someone letting go of luggage that no longer fits. It wasn't a conversation yet. It wasn't an invitation yet. But it was the beginning of a break he didn't know he needed. And while the clock ticked away outside, inside that small coffee shop, time made room for what was stuck inside. Tom smelled the cake, heard the soft sound of the spoon in the cup next to him, and, without meaning to, watched Hillary make another cup, this time for herself. It was just a coffee, but it was also a chance to stay a little longer. And at that moment, Tom understood that maybe that was the message written in each note he kept at the bottom of his briefcase. It's not the coffee, it's what makes it warm. And when Hillary placed the mug in front of him, without saying anything, Tom knew that the rush had stayed outside, along with the rain, along with the cell phone that no longer vibrated. What would come next? He didn't know yet. But inside, something was moving, slowly, like her hibiscus that insisted on blooming at the wrong time. And so, at that crooked wooden table, amidst the smell of cake, hot steam, and scribbled sentences, Tom began to stay, even without understanding. And Hillary, on the other side, understood that some people don't need questions or answers. They just need a coffee that never gets cold, a place that never sends them away. And someone who stays there, at the right time, in the right measure, while the world outside insists on rushing by. And if you've made it this far, stay here too. Because this story still has a lot to say. But this. Tom felt the cold wind hit his face as soon as he pushed open the glass door to go out, but this time he didn't take 2 more steps. The street was gray, the sidewalk was soaked, cars were splashing dirty water everywhere. He looked at his shoes, at the wet jacket on his shoulder, at the cell phone that was shaking in his palm with a message he didn't want to open. It was as if everything was pushing him back inside. And for the first time, Tom left the outside world waiting. He walked back slowly, ran his hand through his wet hair, and breathed in the smell of coffee mixed with freshly baked cornmeal cake. Hillary, on the other side of the counter, held an empty cup, watching without asking anything. She already knew, sometimes silence answers more than any words. At that moment, Tom realized how tired he was of having nowhere to stay. He pretended to look at his phone again, but the notification went off, as if reminding him that there was no urgency worth more than that minute. The coffee cup was in his hand, still closed, the lid intact. A note was there, tucked under the paper flap. He read it silently. When it rains, stay. So simple, so absurd for someone who spent his entire life running from the rain, running from time, running from everything. Hillary didn't offer a chair. She didn't need to. She wiped the counter with a clean cloth, pushed an empty mug closer to him. It was as if to say, the table is yours, if you want it. Tom looked around, as if expecting someone to stop this small act of freedom. No one. Just him, her, and the rain making music on the sidewalk. He pulled out his chair, dropped his briefcase on the floor, still in disbelief that he was sitting there. His phone vibrated again, but this time he didn't pick it up. He let it go. Hillary turned away, but not to run away. She went to the shelf behind the counter, picked up a worn cover book, and opened it to a page marked with yellow paper. He set the book down next to him without saying anything. Tom read the title above the cup, Chronicles for Those in No Hurry. He smiled to himself, a little embarrassed. It was an invitation disguised as an open page. The smell of the coffee she was making now seemed different, warmer, sweeter, as if there was a secret inside the pot. He noticed her hands, small, nimble, but firm. Hillary was all silence, but her silence spoke louder than the loud voice of the street outside. Tom observed every detail: her hair tied up in a mess, her apron with a coffee stain, the toe of her tennis shoe with a hole peeking out from under the counter. She was real, in no hurry to hide anything. And he, so used to hiding everything, began to think he could stay a little longer. The rain got heavier. Heavy drops hit the glass, forming rivers that ran down to the sidewalk. Outside, people were running, opening umbrellas, jumping in puddles. Inside, time stood still. Hillary placed the steaming mug in front of him, uncovered, unhurried. Along with it came another handwritten note, folded. Inside the saucer, sometimes staying is braver than leaving. Tom took a deep breath and looked at her, but Hillary was already busy arranging flowers in a makeshift vase on top of the freezer. He realized he didn't need to say anything now. The mere fact that he was there said it all. Meanwhile, the coffee was slowly cooling, but his chest seemed to be warming. Each sip was like opening a crack in a heart that had been closed for too long. He thought about asking her name, but thought it was silly. Of course he knew it. Hillary. The name was embroidered on a small name tag hanging from her apron, but no one needed to read it to know. Anyone who sat there for more than 5 minutes already understood who she was, someone who listens to what no one says. Tom leaned back in his chair, feeling his body relax, something he hadn't done in so long he'd almost forgotten what it was like. The briefcase leaning against his leg was forgotten. His cell phone vibrated again, insistently, but he didn't answer it. Instead, he ran his finger along the rim of the mug, feeling the warmth spread through his fingertips, as if the cup were a small house he could hold. Hillary went back behind the counter, leaned her elbow on the wood, and watched him like someone watching a bird landing on a window for the first time. She didn't smile big, didn't say anything to break the spell. She just left him there, sitting, breathing, staying. The old clock on the wall ticked softly, matching the sound of the rain. Outside, horns honked, footsteps hurriedly, tires cutting through puddles. Inside, 2 cups, an empty bench between them, and a question that no one asked out loud: will he come back tomorrow? Hillary didn't want an answer right now. You knew that some people needed to be silent before they could say anything. And Tom, even without understanding, had already said everything just by not leaving. Steam rose from the mug like a wisp of smoke that sewed the two together. Each sip Tom took was one more second of courage. Courage to be there, to take his time, not to look at his cell phone, not to run away like he always did. Hillary went back to the coffee machine, wiped the counter again, touched something that didn't need to be touched, just to give the silence time to do its work. Anyone looking from the outside would say he was just another customer trapped by the rain. But anyone feeling it from the inside would understand that bench held a man who, even without knowing it, was starting to get married. And the story that lives inside this coffee shop still had a lot of steam to rise. Tom came back the next day, even though there was no rain to force him to stay. He arrived earlier than usual, leaned his shoulder against the glass door, and peered inside as if looking for a reason to come in, but deep down he already knew he wasn't there for the coffee, but for what came with it. Hillary was behind the counter, as always, arranging the hibiscus that insisted on blooming out of season. When she saw him, she smiled that restrained smile, the smile of someone who doesn't give everything away at once. Tom ran his hand through his hair, took off his jacket, and hung it on the back of the chair he had chosen as if it had always been his. His cell phone stayed in his briefcase, turned off. He took a deep breath, smelling the cake coming from the small kitchen, mixed with the fresh coffee that Hillary was already starting to prepare without asking for his order. He didn't need to. She knew. The travel mug was gone. Instead, Hillary brought a ceramic mug, with a small crack on the rim, which gave off an imperfect charm, like almost everything else inside. As she poured the hot coffee, Hillary began to talk. She didn't say much, but when she did, she let the words spread slowly, like the smell of bread fresh from the oven. She told where the plants spread across the counter came from and explained that each one had a story, a care, a name. She showed the fern hanging in the window and said that she talked to it every day, even though she knew no one believed her. Tom listened in silence, shaking his head, letting out a smile when she said something that sounded too absurd for his haste. But deep down, he liked it. He liked hearing things that made no sense. He liked imagining that someone really talked to plants. He liked knowing that there, within those tight walls, the world could stop without guilt. Over time, Hillary started asking questions too. Not invasive questions, just curious ones. She wanted to know what he read when he wasn't reading anything, what he thought when he looked at the street so much, what he kept in that leather briefcase that was always leaning against his leg. Tom took a while to open his mouth. At first, he answered with short, dry answers. But each sip of coffee seemed to loosen a knot inside him, and, without understanding, he started telling him things that even he didn't remember anymore. That hurt. He talked about the office that was too big to fit someone who had always felt small. He talked about the quiet house he had rented after his mother moved to another city, as if a mother was something you could move. He talked about the room with no pictures, the refrigerator with no notes stuck to it, the window that was never open. He said that sometimes he thought there was nothing wrong with living like this, until he realized he was missing something he couldn't name. Hillary didn't interrupt. She just wiped the counter, arranged the cups, and stirred the spoon in his mug. Every now and then he would say, "I see." And that was enough. Tom began to realize that Hillary was guarding what he said like someone guarding seeds. She wasn't the kind of person who gave an opinion without being asked, or who gave advice that no one wanted to hear. She was just there, with calm eyes, warm silence, words just right. And that was all. One morning, when the sky was still cloudy, Tom arrived before she opened. He sat on the sidewalk, leaning against the glass door. Hillary was startled when she lifted the curtain and saw him face to face, his jacket acting as a cover against the cold wind. She opened the door slowly, without asking why he was there so early. She just looked, took a breath, pulled him inside and put the kettle on. While the coffee was heating, Hillary talked about her dreams, one day opening another coffee shop, bigger, with more tables, more flowers, more people to listen to. She told him she had notebooks full of phrases she never used on the cups. She told him that sometimes she wrote letters to no one, just to feel like she was saying important things to someone, even if no one read them. Tom listened to everything with his head down, watching the steam rise from the mug. He thought that it had been a long time since he had heard anyone talk about dreams without laughing at the end, as if apologizing for believing in something. There, in front of her, there was no excuse. There was a man who was beginning to remember how good it was to hear someone dream big. Every day, his chair seemed to fit more tightly into that corner. His leather briefcase became an elbow rest. His cell phone was turned off. His jacket was thrown over the back of his chair. And time, which was rushing by outside, stretched out inside like a tablecloth spread out for a never-ending coffee. Hillary spoke slowly. Tom responded with pauses, short laughs. Glances that now held for whole seconds without looking away. Sometimes she wrote another note, but now she handed it folded into the palm of his hand, as if it were a secret kept just for the two of us. And so, day after day, Tom left the travel coffee behind. Each sip was a step towards something he couldn't name, but he could feel. Each sentence of hers was a step into a place he had always been afraid to visit, himself. And between the steam from the mug, the smell of cake in the oven, the soft ticking of the clock on the wall, Hillary and Tom were truly seeing each other. Without rushing, without a recipe, without a label. That morning, Hillary arrived earlier than usual. Maybe it was her intuition telling her that this day would not be like the others. Maybe it was just her habit of waiting. She set the tables, changed the water for the plants, hung up her apron that already had the smell of coffee embedded in its fabric. He glanced at the door a few times before even opening it. The old clock on the wall showed the same time Tom usually showed up, his jacket a little askew, his eyes a little distant, but always there, punctual as if he were fulfilling a secret ritual. But that morning, the doorbell didn't ring. Hillary looked at his mug, the cracked ceramic one at the rim, her favorite, the one that seemed to fit only in his hand. She made the coffee anyway, poured it slowly, stirred it with the spoon to watch the steam rise, tried to believe that there was still time for him to come in and say something, even if it was just to sit in silence. But the clock ticked, the street outside woke up, cars came and went, customers came in, ordered, left, and Tom never showed up. Hillary looked at her cup so many times that she lost count. Each customer who opened the door made her heart beat as if he were arriving. But he wasn't. The coffee went cold, the steam went out, the smell mixed with the smell of the rest, with the cake, with the flowers, with life that went on. And Hillary, with a damp cloth in her hand, stood behind the counter holding on to the longing for something she didn't even know was already longing. She left the mug there, untouched, as if it were a warning to herself not to lose hope. Even if it was silly, even if it was just a coffee that would never be drunk again. And on the ticket shelf that she kept behind the cash register, she separated a blank piece of paper. She wrote without thinking much, "Come back whenever you want. Nobody here asks why you took so long." She folded the paper and stuck it under the saucer. It was her way of believing that, somehow, he could read it even without being there. Night fell with a fine drizzle that licked the glass of the shop window. The clock showed closing time. Hillary turned off the lights slowly, as if she didn't want to wake up the void. She put away the damp cloth, took off her apron, and looked at the chair where Tom always sat, now empty, cold, like the mug that had been filled to the brim. The stubborn hibiscus opened a new flower at dawn, as if telling her to be patient, as if plants could give advice to a heart that doesn't know how to wait. The next day, Hillary arrived even earlier. The smell of coffee seemed stronger, or maybe it was just that her chest felt it deeper. She turned on the lights, opened the door, and hung the chalkboard with a new phrase: "Sometimes, those who leave, come back better." He took a deep breath and put Tom's favorite mug back in the same place. But deep down, he didn't know if he would have the courage to fill it up again. It was too early for hope, too late to say he didn't miss it. The day passed slowly. The clock ticked at the same pace as always. People came in, got coffee, rushed to work. Hillary smiled, asked questions, wrote notes on everyone's cups, but inside each sentence seemed empty. His stool remained there, untouched, as if it were part of the furniture. And then, as the sun began to filter through the cracks in the window, the bell on the door jingled slowly. Hillary looked up too quickly, her heart leaping as if she knew before her eyes. And there was Tom. It wasn't the same Tom who'd come in last time. His suit jacket was more wrinkled than ever, his hair was messy, his beard was starting to graze his chin. Wet from the rain that was falling again, he was holding a paper cup in his hand, the same kind of cup he'd once hated using in here. Hillary stopped behind the counter, unsure whether to walk up to him or wait for him to walk the rest of the way. Tom took a deep breath, looked at the cup in his hand as if he were offering an apology. He took a step, then another. He placed the glass on the counter between them. He said nothing. Hillary looked at the glass, noticed the crooked lid, the steam still rising from it, hot and alive. Underneath the lid was a folded piece of paper. She pulled it out slowly, opened it, and read it silently. The words danced in his crooked handwriting: "It's not the coffee. It's what makes it hot." Her chest warmed in a way no kettle could. Tom didn't apologize, didn't explain where he was, didn't say why he hadn't come. And Hillary didn't ask. Instead, she picked up the cracked mug, washed it slowly in the sink, filled it with fresh coffee, and set it in front of him. Tom took the lid off the cup he'd brought and leaned it against the side, as if offering to trade. The silence between them said everything that his mouth didn't need to repeat. Outside, the rain was getting heavier again, beating against the window like a song that matched the moment. The usual bench was empty, waiting for Tom to sit down again. Hillary leaned against the counter, held the clean cloth, and slowly ran her hand over the wood as if she were running her hand over a detail worth keeping. Tom took a deep breath, took off his wet jacket, hung it on the back of the chair, pushed the briefcase aside, and opened his palm on the table as if signing in without a pen. And Hillary, on the other side, understood that what had started as a small note was now much bigger than the cup he had brought. And in that steam rising from the cracked mug, between the rain outside and the smell of hot coffee inside, something settled in each person's chest. It was the silent certainty that staying is always harder than leaving. But those who stay write stories that don't fit in takeout cups. And while the clock marked the time outside, inside that small coffee shop, time took on another name. And what came next? Tom came back with another mug, this time holding it more firmly, as if the fear of making a mistake had given way to a new care. The smell of fresh coffee spread through the air again, mixed with the sweet aroma that escaped from the oven, where Hillary always left a simple cake waiting for whoever needed a piece of comfort. She followed his every move with calm eyes, as if she memorized every detail of a scene she didn't want to forget. He messed up when measuring the sugar, spilled some on the counter, wiped it off with the palm of his hand, and laughed quietly to himself. And Hillary laughed too, not at his mistake, but at his courage to stay there, so close, so far from the hurried man who had come through that door days ago, just to order coffee to go and disappear into the rush of the street. He pushed the mug toward her again, but this time he sat facing her, leaned his arms on the table, and let his jacket slide down the back of the chair. It was there, at that small table, that they both understood that time, when it wants to, knows how to stop on a crooked wooden tabletop, between a spoon hitting the edge and the steam that insists on rising even when the street outside screams that everyone needs to run. Hillary rested her elbows on the table, held the mug with both hands, and felt the heat pass from the cracked porcelain straight to her fingertips, then to her chest, then to the part inside her that she had always protected from the rest of the world. Tom, on the other side, looked at everything as if he were looking at a domestic miracle, an ordinary woman, a cup, a rainy afternoon, and all of that was much more than he could buy with the money he kept in the leather briefcase now lying on the floor. As she sipped her coffee slowly, he told her about the nights he would come home and leave the notes she had written scattered across the table, like headlights in a dark apartment. He told her that sometimes he would read the sentences again, even though he knew them by heart, just to feel that someone was still writing to him when the rest of the world seemed too busy to remember he existed. Hillary listened, stirring her coffee with her spoon, letting out a hum every now and then, but without interrupting, because she knew that each silence he made was also a way of confessing secrets that could not be said out loud. The street outside continued its hurried pace, honking horns, footsteps, people complaining about their umbrellas that wouldn't close. But inside, the sound was different, the soft sound of a spoon, the clink of a saucer touching the table, the calm breathing of two strangers who were no longer such strangers. Tom looked at the fogged-up window, saw his reflection mixed with hers, saw that now there was no longer a one-way street, there was a return, a break, there was someone who would stay. Hillary rested her chin on her hand, smiled a little, as if she understood that sometimes we don't need answers, just a table, a coffee, and a look that says stay a little longer. And so, between one word and another, between one sip and another, the world outside continued to spin quickly. But inside, time spun in small, warm circles, like steam rising from a mug and drawing invisible clouds in the air. Hillary stood up slowly, went to the counter, took a piece of the still warm cornmeal cake, brought it on a simple plate, and placed it in front of him. Tom looked at it, smiled, took it with his own hand, without a fork, as if he understood that some things don't need ceremony, they need courage to be felt. And he felt it, the taste of the cake, the smell of the coffee, the soft touch of her fingers touching his as she picked up the empty saucer. Sometimes, your whole life changes in a takeout coffee that you decide to stay. This phrase, which started out scribbled on a paper cup, was now engraved in the way they looked at each other in no rush to finish. And here, where each sip is a story that warms the soul, we know that true love lives in the details, in the silence, in the crooked table, in the folded napkin, in the note forgotten at the bottom of a folder. So stay. Stay, because those who comment below help the story grow even more, spread this warmth around, and make this little corner an open cafe for those who believe that every life deserves a warm break on a gray day. Did you enjoy feeling that too? Then, stay. Here, each story is a warm sip on a gray day, and your comment is the next note we leave for whoever comes later. If this story made your heart warm like a freshly brewed coffee, then subscribe to the channel now so you don't miss any cup of emotion that we serve here. And if you stayed until the end, prove that you're really here. Comment below I stay, because whoever comments this shows that they still believe in the power of a hot coffee, a well-kept silence, and a love that chooses to stay.